You're listening to The Other 50%, a Herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where I talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. For this episode, I got to meet Faiza Kracheni and Carrie Cates of Austin School of Film, which for nearly 2 decades has provided alternative education programs and workshops for all ages interested in the arts and film. Faiza Kracheni is the Programs and Educations Director, and Carrie Cates is the Artist and Community Director. These women have taken their passion for filmmaking and created a completely accessible space for a growing community of creators, breaking down barriers inherent in our society. They launched their newest program, Play at Home, as a direct response to the ongoing pandemic. Play at Home is an online, offline, interactive experience featuring live workshops, events, screenings, and talks by artists and filmmakers from around the globe. Since the launch of Play at Home in April of 2020, it has hosted 40 workshops and events with over 900 participants in 14 countries. You can find us at theother50%.com for added features, photos, show notes, and the merchandise. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts and all the podcast places. Okay, here's my conversation with Faiza Kracheni and Carrie Cates. Have a listen. I'm going to say hello to Faiza and Carrie, but I want you to say hello so we know your voices. So let's start with you, Faiza. Hi, welcome.
Hi.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What is the Austin School of Film?
Cool. So I will answer that. Sorry.
That's Faiza.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of history and context before we kind of get into Austin School of Film.
Good.
So our organization was actually founded by the merging of 2 other organizations. And those organizations were Austin Cinemaker Co-op, which was like an artist share collective in Austin in the early 90s to the late 90s. And Center for Young Cinema, which was the first year-round film school in the Southwest for youth under the age of 18. And so a little bit about each. So Austin Cinemaker Co-op was run by a collective of artists, and they did skills sharing and workshops primarily on like low gauge filmmaking formats. So like 16 millimeter and Super 8. And definitely they were not scared about pushing boundaries and like creating like very innovative and experimental works. They also had really awesome screenings where you'd actually like shoot on a Super 8 and then bring your cartridge of film and then bring a separate soundtrack, and they would premiere it all live at one time. They were really popular. So that organization was actually our executive director now, her name is Ann Getzman Kelly, actually went to their meetups, but not for herself. She actually went for her son that was about 10 years old at the time, because there was nowhere in Austin that was teaching film. And so she actually contacted them like in the 90s and was like, hey, my son and his friend are really interested in film. There's nowhere that teaches film for kids. Can I bring them? And they were kind of like, we don't know if that's appropriate, but like, whatever, let's try it. And so these 2 little 10-year-olds ended up becoming integral parts of Austin Cinemaker Co-op. And the folks over at Austin Cinemaker Co-op actually helped her start Center for Young Cinema because there was no place for kids to go. So both of these organizations were kind of serving like the on the fringes, arty misfit kids that like had a love for cinema but didn't have a place to actually go and access it. Some notable members of Austin Cinemaker Co-op include like Guillermo del Toro, the Mexican film director, Lee Daniel, the cinematographer. But, you know, this was before they were Guillermo del Toro and Lee Daniel. And so the 2 organizations, worked closely on events and things of that nature throughout the years, and then just decided to merge officially in 2002. And thus was born Motion Media Art Center. We actually changed our DBA to Austin School of Film shortly after incorporating, because people really had issues with understanding the terminology of media arts. They would call and think it was like a newspaper, or, you know, they wouldn't think film when they thought media arts. Now it's still a term, I think, that confuses people. So we've kind of stuck with it and embraced it. But Austin School of Film is one of the programs that Motion Media Arts Center actually runs.
Okay. And I love that out of advocacy for her son, she started a whole organization that became this whole school. That is so cool.
Yeah. And her son actually went on to make independent films, become an actor, a musician, and the other kid did as well that was making films. And it kind of like birthed this whole like movement of these younger kids in Austin. They got written about in the newspapers. They had spotlights on HBO Family. Like it went places. But it's because these kids were really pushed to make films that they wanted to make rather than making kid films, if that makes sense.
Right. That is very cool. Now, Faiza, what is your background? How did you get involved in this?
So I actually got involved at the organization when I was in high school, on and off. And I was actually friends with the kids that were taking classes there. And we were all involved in the punk community. So we all played in punk bands, and I actually still play in punk bands. And so I had never really been introduced to film. And so like the making a film, of course, I liked movies. And, you know, as like someone that's into punk, you're always into digging for more, right? So like I was very into, and my friends were very into kind of looking at the underground films and looking at like French New Wave or cult horror. And so we saw probably really inappropriate movies for our age, but you know, whatever. So anyway, so I actually got involved there when I was about 15, 16 years old. I picked up my first Super 8 camera when I was 16, and I just loved it. And I actually haven't put the camera down since. I still shoot on Super 8. And then, you know, I went off, did my own thing, went on tour, made films, did all sorts of stuff. And then in early adulthood, I actually came back and I volunteered, and I got it kind of simultaneously happened when I got an internship on Tree of Life with Terrence Malick's film. And Terrence Malick is one of my favorite filmmakers. And so, yeah, and then I kind of just started helping out at the school. And at that point in time, you know, it was the early 2000s. So the school was very small. So Austin School of Film, you know, served hundreds, which is now we serve thousands. Kind of intermittently worked there on and off when I had free time, and then kind of got really serious about it in my mid 20s and kind of just kept coming around until they kept me.
And here we are.
Yeah.
Carrie, let's talk to you. Maybe you could start by telling us about the Play at Home program. I'm guessing that was a pivot for COVID. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so this has been really a lot of Faiza's doing because she's our education director. But ultimately, when we kind of went into lockdown with the pandemic, we had to figure out a way to still serve the people that, you know, we serve. It was a pretty high demand time where people had a lot more free time. And that's been a big obstacle in the past for people who want to get into filmmaking. They have, you know, full-time jobs, or they have other things that are really getting in the way of them having that creative outlet. And so with this big shift of people having more free time, or at least more time at home, that they want to fill with something that is enriching or moves them forward in some way, even though we're on a big pause, it took a while to figure out. We were seeing like kids essentially going to school online and just being miserable from like the amount of screen time and the lack of like actual engagement. You're kind of just sitting and watching a screen while someone teaches at you instead of you interacting with it. And so we took a lot of this stuff into account and decided, as we moved to some things online and pivoted, to make sure that we didn't run into those pitfalls. So we do a lot of really cool things like sending supply kits, which is actually something we were doing this past Tuesday. And it can become almost a full day of us just like packaging like little kits of liquid latex and fake blood and stuff so that somebody on a Saturday afternoon can log in and actively follow along with a special effects makeup tutorial, and they can make like some epic monster, or at least a part of a monster that whenever they start shooting again, they can like actually put into play. But we've got a lot of different kits in that way, but also even our more kind of almost lecture-based classes become much more conversational, because the biggest thing we're seeing is that people need that social interaction. Most of us are sitting at home. I mean, I know even when I'm in those classes, I'm like, hey, how are you guys? What are you guys doing in your free time? Like, what's happening? Because I even need that like social interaction and to still meet people online. And so it's become this really beautiful community that has grown out of just something that was our reaction to what was going on in the world. So
that is really cool. And I want to dig a little deeper into your curriculum and what you're doing and all of that. But also, let's talk about your background a little bit and how did you come to this?
yeah, so I moved to Austin in 2012, and I've been a filmmaker for a long time. I went to film school, and a lot of my friends actually, I'm from Indiana originally, and a lot of my friends that I graduated with had moved to Austin, and it seemed like a lot of them were finding work really quickly. This was going to be the time of like Friday Night Lights and the early Sin City stuff, Machete. A lot of those films were shooting in Austin. And it just seemed like a lot of really exciting filmmakers, a lot of exciting opportunities. And so we moved and the film incentives disappeared. So a lot of the stuff that was shooting here vanished. That has since been slowly building back. Like we've got Fear of the Walking Dead and a number of other things that kind of come and go out of Austin. But yeah, so at that point, it was just very much like I have to, if I'm going to work in film, I have to make my own films. I have to find a writer. I'm a producer, so I had to find people to write. I had to find those people to direct and start collaborating with. And luckily, I was in a situation where I already knew about 10 people that I graduated with that were also here and were working. And what's amazing about the film industry is if you get on one set, by the end of, if you stay busy and you really know what you're doing, you can very quickly network and find more opportunities for yourself and just jump from set to set. And in doing that, I ran into a instructor from Austin School of Film, Justine Spinoza, and she's amazing to work with. And I thought, man, she's so cool. I want to be just like her when I grow up. Same age as I am, I think, maybe a little older. But she was like really rocking it, and she was so cool. And she was teaching at Austin School of Film, and it seemed like everything she had to say about the place was amazing. And they had a teaching opportunity that opened up right about the time that I reached out to Faiza. And she's like, come over here and teach. Like, let's get you involved. I can tell you're a hustler. Let's do this. And I never left. I just stuck my claws in and just started teaching their digital filmmaking class, which is an 8-week in-person class where students make a film. And then their end result gets to play at South by Southwest, which is incredible. It's like a part of the official showcase.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
How'd you make that happen?
Yeah, so we've had a very strong partnership with South by Southwest since the beginning of our organization. And so kind of the reason why I think I was very drawn to the Austin School of Film is because of the ethos of the organization. It very much mimics to me what the punk scene, like DIY, do it yourself, be scrappy. You don't have to make a film a certain way. And it's because the executive director was actually involved in music. She went to school for film. She comes from academia. Her father was a huge professor at the University of Texas, Pulitzer Prize winner, amazing, amazing man. But she was kind of the opposite. She was into film and music, and she managed bands in the 70s. So she knew all of the punk bands in Austin, and she like booked shows. She was one of the only women that were involved in the punk community in Austin. And she was actually friends with the founders of South by Southwest before it was South by Southwest. So that networking relationship that she had and the music transpired into film because, one or the two, and I will say as a musician as well, it's really hard nowadays to get those two communities to talk. But it wasn't necessarily like that in the 70s and 80s and 90s because Austin was so much smaller than it is now. And all the artists kind of knew each other. And so, South by Southwest was a baby. Motion Media Art Center was a baby. So both of these organizations kind of like started coming up around the same time, like as far as like popularity. And so that partnership has been around since I think like 2004. We used to actually do a youth event as well, but we scaled it back a little bit. But yeah, we've been doing it for a long time. It's been really great. And as South by Southwest has grown, our showcase has grown. So it's been like this constant like incline. It's really great and cool to see.
Yeah, that's amazing. That just goes to show you how important relationships are in this business, right? Because you're running around doing something as a PA or volunteering with somebody, and then time goes by and you're both rising through the ranks together until everyone's sitting at the top of the heap and can really help each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Let's talk about the classes that you do at Work From Home. Or Work From Home. That's what I'm doing. Play at home.
Play at home. Yeah. So stemming a little bit off of what Carrie was sharing, personally for me, I think it was really important that whatever we curated, it be low pressure. And the reason for that is we don't want to ignore that there's an ongoing pandemic. This isn't a, resource that we're putting out in the world, but we're brushing off that COVID-19 is happening. Like COVID-19 is happening, like people are dying, and like there's lots of very scary things happening in the world. There's, injustices, police brutality, all of these things. And we actually talk about these things in our Play at Home workshops and events because we're really trying to be transparent about what we're doing. We're all about transparency at our organization. And so essentially what we did is we sat down and thought about it and we brainstormed, and we teach 52 different classes at the school. So we have about 500 classes that we run year round. Some of them are short form, like weekend workshops, right? Like more of intensive. And some of them are longer form that are like between 4 weeks and 12 weeks long, depending on them. Because some of the classes you're actually making a film, you're producing an end result at the end. So we kind of looked at what our barriers were. So number one, the barrier is that people need to be staying at home. That's number one. Number two, we looked at supplies and accessibility and resources that these students would need. And so classes that we could apply a creative media box to, we did, but we wanted to make sure that it was economical and that we weren't leaving anyone behind that might want to access this information, right? And learn something or connect with the creative community. So we strategically picked classes in which we could put together creative media boxes of the tools and supplies that they need that would be economical, that would be $30 or less. So obviously a digital filmmaking class, we wanted to teach them DSLR, you'd have to have access to a DSLR camera. That's going to right away just divide, right? Do this class divide, which is the whole reason our organization exists, is to defy those statistics, because systemic racism is real. And with racism comes lack of access and lack of opportunities and oppression. And it's something that we're very aware of and something that we talk about a lot. So when we were putting together these programs, we wanted to make sure that we were still hitting the targets of our mission to serve people who are interested in their arts, but those who are yet to be. So people that have had an interest, but haven't had an opportunity to access, right? So we did things like 16 millimeter direct animation, which is like a highly experimental technique popularized by experimental artists in the 60s. We do like cocktails in cinema, which is like, hey, we're going to make a live cocktail with a real bartender. And then we're going to watch some films and actually have a discussion about them and talk about them. So like there's a little bit of like analytical thinking. There's some hands-on like workshops. There's some just like straight up fun stuff like the special effects. And then there's like these almost like lecture-based classes, but that are interactive, that really are trying to promote dialogue, like intro to documentary film format, film as art, sound as film. So kind of these almost mimicking what you would see in like grad school, but just for the community to engage and people of all levels to engage and have like a constructive dialogue together about these things. And so something that we also really kind of pride ourselves on at the Austin School of Film is learning while doing. So like actually watching the film and really discussing it in real time and saying things that, you might not know or you just feel, and then learning what those things mean and dissecting them, or learning what celluloid film is, or learning what frames per second means. And it's just been this amazing experience. We've had over 1,500 people join us from all over the world. And it's just been, I mean, now I call some of these people my friends, and like I've never met them. They don't even live in Austin. They don't even live in Texas. So
I mean, that's the great part of it, is now people can join you from all over the world.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And I understand now this is not just for kids.
Oh, it's not for kids at all. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So all play at home stuff is for ages 18 and up. Some of it, we allow 16-year-olds in, like some of it, like the special effects makeup, for example, we've let some younger kids in. But yeah, this program is designed for adults. We do have a youth program, but also there's so many amazing, e-learning programs out there for kids that are international. But this is like, there isn't anything like this for adults. And, universities are doing classes online, but they're only accessible to their students. So what do you do at that point,
Yeah, I think it's great. And the whole inclusion bit, it makes me want to ask the question, how is the organization funded? Because it sounds like you're not charging enough to actually pay for what you're delivering.
No. So basically Play at Home was spawned not as a pivot for revenue, but as a pivot for the community. So how can we take our programs and now make them accessible given our barriers, right? Now, for the organization itself, we are funded by the city of Austin, which has a whole cultural arts division. And so we're funded by them. They're one of our biggest funders. We're also funded by the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Texas Commission on the Arts, a bunch of other places. So we basically write grants, and then we also lead. So we're very like bootstrapped. So we do every phase of it. We do have a support team, of course, and faculty and all that good stuff. But one day me and Carrie might be writing a grant, and then I might be hopping on to teach a 16mm direct animation workshop, and then hopping off and then going and packing orders. So it's very like, it's this like very DIY, but professional, obviously, but DIY ethos. Like it's a passion. We don't have big donors, so we're not funded by, rich people, for the lack of the better word. We do get donations, from working class people. That's who we serve, the working class community. And, it's never big donors, but, that $5 to $20 to $25 a month, like that adds up after a while as well. We also don't really do any kind of like annual gala or something of that nature. That's not really our style, but we do apply for any and every grant that we qualify for.
You just sound so mission driven. Yeah. And I got to think that's so fulfilling as a vocation, really, of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think what's really important to kind of know about us is that Faiza and me and Anne, the three directors, because there's only three directors that run this whole ship. We've got, a few support staff as well, but everyone who works here is a filmmaker. And so we very much have built a thing that's what we all would want. It's a space, and it has all the things we would want to learn if we were just getting started. And so there's so much passion that goes into it that I think, I oftentimes with my digital filmmaking class, whenever we were in person, that class runs until like 9:30 at night, because we kind of build that schedule often around a lot of 9 to 5 people. And so it won't start until 6:30. It gets out at 9:30. And at 9:30, I'm so wound up and I have so much energy from like, it's not a job that you go home and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. And I mean, you are exhausted because you are working your tail off, but you get so much more back from it than what you put in, that I think that really, it really is a great place to work in that way.
Now, I'm so curious about Austin, because it is such a creative mecca, just tucked into the middle of Texas. Like, can you even put your finger on what it is that makes Austin so special and so different?
So I'm born and raised in Austin, which I know is like, what? But I'm from a historically underserved and underrepresented neighborhood in East Austin. But, in East Austin, growing up in East Austin, there were always artists. I mean, Mainstream society may have not viewed them as artists, but they were graffiti artists that did like graffiti, airbrushing, all that kind of stuff. To me, I think it's the culture personally in my like lived experience of East Austin that inspired me to want to make films, making films about people that people, you often don't see on film. I also think with Austin, growing up in Austin, I mean, just kind of painting you a picture. I lived in East Austin and it's like very close to downtown, maybe like 2 hours or 2 miles from downtown. And when you're a 16-year-old kid, like walking 2 miles is like nothing, Now I'm like, ugh. And there was a place, it's still around, but it's under different ownership. But when it was downtown, it was called Emos, and it was a live music venue. They had all ages shows. So that's how I was able to like participate in the community. And in Austin, the music community is that there are all ages shows. So they're actually like promoting people of all kinds to come and experience music or film. And so I would walk 2 miles to Emos and go see bands. They had like matinee shows, and then I would walk home. So the show started at 5. Same with Alamo Drafthouse. Like growing up, Alamo Drafthouse was this small theater on Colorado Street in Austin. And I mean, you could go and like sit next to Quentin Tarantino at the movies and watch his favorite films with him as he's like drunk as hell, like drinking, and watch these exploitation films as a 16-year-old. Like as a 16-year-old, I went to Alamo Drafthouse and did that. So it's like, there's just not this ego. There wasn't this ego. So it was like, just make whatever art you want to make. And like the weirder, the better. We're not going to judge you. We're going to actually embrace it. So it's almost like Austin embraced the weirdos and the freaks. And like, that's why I'm Slackers, like that's a weirdo freak movie. And yeah, I don't know. I just feel like people are approachable in Austin, or they used to be. I mean, now we have a lot of people that aren't from Austin that live in Austin. So the culture's changing a bit. But
they're ruining it.
I didn't say that, but
just kidding.
In addition to what Faiza had just mentioned too, it seems like, I don't know, I'm from Indiana originally, and I think whenever I would tell people, oh yeah, I'm a filmmaker there, they're like, oh, okay. So you're going to live with your parents for the rest of your life. And it's like, well, no, I'm, and you come to Austin and people don't like look at you like you're insane for wanting to be an artist. They're just like, oh, cool. How can I help you? And that in itself is so vastly different. I think even for every other film community, like you go to LA and you say that you're a filmmaker, they're like, oh, where do you wait staff? Or, oh, sure you are. Okay. Just like everybody else. It's just, and it's a very competitive situation elsewhere. Whereas here you say that and people are like, cool, what are you working on? Can I come? And that's, I don't know, it's an exciting place to work and make films and things.
It's great. So are you guys both still making films also in addition to this work?
Mm-hmm.
What are you working on?
I just had a film called The Rink that's on the festival circuit right now. This weekend it's playing at the Indie Film Festival, but it's played at Heartland Film Festival. I think the week after it's playing at, there's some horror, I don't know, I've lost track, but it's like Horrible Happenings or Horrible Images Film Festival or something. I mainly work in horror, so like B-horror, slasher, lots of fake blood stuff, so yeah.
Very cool. Congratulations.
Thanks. And Faiza's got some cool stuff too.
Yeah, what's going on?
I primarily, so I'm very much, I would say like a film artist versus a filmmaker. So I use film as like my paintbrush. So I do installation, but then I also do just like sit down film. I'm gravitating more towards installation the older I get. And so less of like sitting down at a movie theater and more of this is an exhibition, but using film as my tool. Right now, I actually just started a new a music project, but film and music go very hand in hand with me. So I've just been creating things like honestly, like in my house for for like little promos for the band. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I'm working on. I sometimes shoot for like different types of clients, like if they want analog, just because it's not everybody's widely trained on analog cameras. But yeah, that's pretty much what I'm focusing on. I haven't actually like made a film, like a sit down film since 2017, but that film kind of toured around the US and played in different like art shows and like exhibitions. So it's a little bit different, I guess, than like what you would think about when you hear the word film or filming.
What was that sit down film called?
So it's actually changed names. So now it's just Untitled right now. But before that it was called Flesh, but the it had a lot of S's in it. But yeah, so yeah. And they're experimental films. They're not narrative films, they're not documentaries. Some of the installations can be viewed as documentary, but they're not to me.
Okay, I've never heard anyone describe filmmaking the way that you just did, where you differentiate between a sit-down film and an installation. I was going to ask you, like, what does that mean? And then you explained it, so thank you. Could you describe an installation that you've done?
Sure. So I'll describe an installation, the last piece that I did. So there was a day, I think it was nationwide, and it was called A Day Without Immigrants. Mm-hmm. And so I was actually working at the school, and I grabbed a Super 8 camera and some film, and I took an Uber down to City Hall where they were. And so with Super 8, right, it's a silent film, and so like it's a silent film stock, and you can't really roll audio at the same time because when you pull the trigger, you hear the motor, right? So you kind of have to get creative when you're shooting on Super 8. So I shot some downtown of the immigrants that were primarily from the Latinx community, which I am as well. And, got a bunch of footage of them. It was in black and white. And then I also captured external audio. And then I edited those two together and then presented it as an installation piece on commentary on immigration. So that's like kind of more of a documentary one. And so essentially it was just like playing on a loop. It was just like a 30-second loop. The audio was separate, but it was captured at the same event. So it kind of evoked that feel of like a protest or a demonstration, played at a loud volume purposely to kind of like, get adrenaline up as the viewer was watching the piece. So yeah, that's my most recent one.
Pretty immersive.
Yeah.
That is very cool. So I imagine that you guys are going to have a lot of things to say about what do you make of the current state of the world? I mean, in the last 3 years, we've had Me Too, we're having Black Lives Matter, we're having the pandemic, all the boils of America are coming to the surface and exploding. What are you making of this moment in time?
Yeah, I think that is a really big question. I think that there's a lot of interesting opportunities that are opening. Specifically, I think I can talk mostly to the Me Too stuff, in that I guess it's people are checking themselves a little more on set, which is good. I was so used to prior, like working on a set, and again, often I'm producing, so I don't look like I'm doing much. I'm sitting with a computer or my phone, and I'm trying to figure out where the food is or what's like why is the holdup? What's going on? Okay, now I need to reschedule tomorrow or whatever. But ultimately, like, I'm just sitting there, what looks like looking at my phone, and
you're doing the invisible labor.
Yeah. So often that's very true. And often I would get situations where somebody would just hand me something, or they'd be like, "Hey, can you go get coffee for blah, blah, blah?" And I'm like, "I'm not a PA. I hired you. Hi, maybe you should keep an eye on what you're doing here." And I think that's been exciting. And I've always worked on projects where we had strong female leads. That's been something that's been really important to me, over the course of my career. And the fact that I'm a producer, I often get to greenlight those things and really make them happen. And so really, like, my entire filmography is very focused on that. And I guess that if anything, I think it's also helping festivals to really think about who it is that they're putting on their screen, who they're giving screen time to, And that's been really exciting. And it's fun to see more films coming out for me. Like, so many films had that voyeur like look at females, and it's hard to connect to. So I'm excited about the new things that are coming to the screen and how everything is evolving. It sucks that there's been so much work in that, having to fight that fight or explain to men why this is happening.
Still.
And yeah, the microaggressions, all of those things just kind of build up. And so I feel like it's a lot of emotional labor that is unfortunate but necessary. And hopefully one day in the future we don't have to deal with that. But I think Faiza works so hard in and has really been documenting a lot of these changes from the ground. So I'm interested in hearing more what she's got to say on this topic.
So as far as the Me Too movement, actually around the same time in 2017, or actually before Me Too happened, me and two other women, one is an illustrator and one is a documentary filmmaker, founded a film festival called Transform Film Fest, and it's Austin's only film festival dedicated to Texas women. And, we wanted to be inclusive. And so we actually refrain from words like female. We use the word woman because it can be trans exclusionary. And there is another festival in Texas, but, every other word is the word female. And so that can always not feel welcoming to trans women. Trans women are women. And so we started that film festival, kind of the behind the scenes of it. And then Me Too started happening. And so our first festival, our first inaugural festival, happened during the Me Too movement. And so it was really interesting. I mean, it was a baby. I mean, it still is a baby organization, but it was a baby at that point in time. And so it was very interesting seeing kind of the types of films that were submitted, the turnout, the trolls on Instagram and Facebook. And then as Me Too has kind of progressed, so has the festival. So it was really interesting for us kind of starting this women's festival at the exact same time as Me Too. It wasn't planned, obviously. We didn't know that was going to happen. And so, that has been kind of a wild ride. And then on top of that, I think our organization, just in general, it has always been kind of this taboo in the arts nonprofit sector to not be political, to not say what your political stance is. But I feel at this point in time, people are painting politics that are not politics, and they're human rights. It's quite literally human rights. It has nothing to do with political party. And so we, as an organization, have made a decision to be very transparent again and say Black Lives Matter, but then also on top of that, actively do things within our community to curate events and workshops that reflect that. And I do think that, it helps that we are led by women, and also that the majority of people that work with us are people of color in the community, and also primarily who we serve are people of color, and the working class community. And so we're constantly, even before, all the political unrest, we're constantly re-examining what intersectionality means in film and the arts. What is the intersection between class and culture and race and gender and all of those things? You have to kind of think about those things. And it's something that I always think about as a woman of color. It's something that's always on my mind, and the other thing I want to say is we also, in our classes, we add this stuff in. When you're not just taking a film class, all right? We're going to teach you the film class. We're going to show you work that's important, and then we're going to talk about it. But we're also going to talk about the context. Recently I was talking to somebody about La Jetée by Chris Marker, which is a film that kind of came right after the French-Algerian or after Algeria got its independence. And it's something that I'm very passionate about because I'm also Algerian. And talking about the context. When did Chris Marker make that film, and how does it reflect kind of French nationalism undertones? Let's unpack that for a minute, And you want to be, I think something that we all always try to be is like very open to communication and very gentle when we're talking about things that are sensitive subjects, and often want the people that are directly affected by those things leading those discussions and being centered in those discussions. But yeah, I would be lying if I didn't say that we were very outspoken about why we exist and what we do. And it's because systemic racism exists. That's why we exist, to kind of overcome in any capacity with our mission to give the resources and reallocate the resources to the people that deserve them and need them.
And tell their story. Absolutely. Because that's why we're here. Filmmakers need to tell their story, and we're doing the work to make sure that happens, and we're not telling ours.
What is the stated mission of the organization?
The stated mission of the organization, let me see. I don't have that one memorized. The actual mission is, it's loading, is Motion Media Art Center is a 501c3 nonprofit independent film, art, and technology center that supports every aspect of production from creation to presentation. Founded in 2002 with the merging of two award-winning arts and film institutes, Austin Cinemaker Co-op, Center for Young Cinema, MMAC has been globally recognized for its innovative media arts program for nearly 2 decades. Our goal is to empower, support, and educate emerging artists of all ages as active participants in shaping our culture and engaging communities to rethink the way we view film, art, and technology. We provide alternative ways to work, learn, create, and consume the arts in the digital era.
Beautiful. How can people find you?
Online. I would say we're most active on Instagram, which is just at Austin School of Film. You can also go to our website, which is the same URL. Also, Austin Film School works as well. We kind of have like a bunch of different domains that redirect you to the same page in case people, misspell things. And we also have a Facebook. I will say we're not as active on Facebook as Instagram. We post stories and kind of go live and do all sorts of things on Instagram. It's just a little more mobile than Facebook. So, yeah.
We're also more visual than we are with the text. So it's a good medium for us.
That's the real reason, actually.
It all makes sense.
Yeah.
What did I not ask you about that I should have asked you about?
I guess about our faculty.
Tell us about your faculty.
Yeah. So all of the other thing that makes Austin School of Film unique is that all of our teachers are working professionals. So if you're taking an editing class, you're learning from an editor. If you're taking an animation class, you're learning from an animator. So some of our instructors are like Allie Jackson. She is amazing. She's actually just completing a residency at the Line Hotel in Austin. But she also is a director, art director at Arts and Labor, which is a pretty big production house in Austin that does commercials, short films, and features. But the coolest thing about her is, she went to school for fine art. She did not go to school for film. She's an amazing animator and also does motion graphics and things of that nature. She does this amazing thing where she'll create like a painting, just like a large scale painting. And then she'll create a QR code for Snapchat, and she creates an augmented reality of the painting. So she's been doing this thing where she's actually selling visual art and digital art in one bundle to people. And so when they have these pieces in their home, it also comes with a digital interactive element. And that's like, by no surprise, she's an official Snapchat ambassador. So she's made the lenses for like Charlie's Angels, John Wick 3, Nike Jordan All-Star Weekend. I'm forgetting some, but she basically makes the, special edition lenses, and she also makes them for Instagram. But the cool thing about it is this is something kind of new, with her animation and her fine art background. AR was something new as AR has become, a thing. And so now she teaches our students at the school how to do that. So we have a whole class on intro to augmented reality. And it's
Cool.
It's super awesome. Another instructor that I really love is Alonzo J. Luna. He's a cinematographer, and he actually just wrapped principal photography with Terrence Malick, who's one of my favorite filmmakers, for Terrence's newest film. And it was just so cool hearing him talk about Terry and like about how working with him on films was basically like going to his own like mini film school, because the way he did things as a filmmaker were ways that he had never kind of thought of as a cinematographer. And then my last person I'm going to mention is Nathan Bayless, who also went to school with Carrie, but kind of the things that he does with After Effects are self-taught. And he is the senior animator on Undone, which is an Amazon Studio show. And he teaches After Effects and other Cinema 4D at the school. Alonzo teaches cinematography at the school. Allie teaches design courses and AR. The cool thing about all the instructors is they're actually teaching the things that they're passionate about. So you're not getting, a professor, we call them educators at our facility, but you're not getting a professor that's like begrudgingly like teaching this, class that they've been assigned to. You're actually getting people that are coming to us that want to teach with us this specific subject. So it's cool. Like I would never teach a narrative filmmaking class. I'm not a narrative filmmaker. I can make a narrative film. I know what a narrative film is. I know the structure of it, but it's not my passion. So why would I do that,
That is very cool. Thank you both so much for doing this.
You too.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
You've been listening to The Other 50%, a history of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Faiza Kracheni and Carrie Cates for sharing their stories and telling us all about Austin School of Film and the Play at Home program. Special thanks to Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on your favorite podcast provider and leave a review. And of course, on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out with letters, for added features, bios of our guests, and the merch. You can also follow us on all the social media platforms. Thanks for listening. See you next time.